The first night I worked at the ranger station, the forest felt smaller than it looked on a map. Rain tapped softly against the windows. The old radio crackled now and then, as if someone far away was trying to remember a forgotten sentence. A lantern burned beside me, spreading a warm circle of light across stacks of faded reports and trail maps. Outside, the trees stood perfectly still, not swaying, not rustling, just watching. My father used to say forests had moods. Most nights, they were simply sleeping. But sometimes, he said, they became aware of the people walking beneath them. I remember smiling at that thought. Then I noticed something strange. Every wildlife camera on the monitor had frozen at exactly the same time. Different trails, different distances. Same moment. I leaned closer. The screen showed empty paths, silent creeks, abandoned picnic tables, and forgotten stretches of dirt road. Nothing unusual, until I saw the timestamp. All the cameras had stopped recording at 2:17 a.m. The same minute, the same second. As I reached for the radio, a voice emerged through the static. Not speaking, breathing, slow, steady, close enough to feel. The sound lasted only a few seconds before disappearing. Silence returned, yet something had changed. The darkness beyond the station windows no longer felt empty. It felt occupied. I stood and looked toward the tree line. Far beyond the lantern's glow, between the trunks, there was a shape standing where no trail existed. And that's when I saw it. The night shift at the ranger station always felt heavier after midnight. Cold air pressed against the windows, thin and sharp like frozen breath. Outside, the pine forest stood still under a dim, washed-out sky. I was alone on duty, just radio static, and the slow tick of a clock that never seemed to agree with time. Then the first report came in. Lantern lights. Deep in the closed hiking route, beyond marker 12. Moving, flickering, like someone walking where no one should be. I stared at the map spread across the desk. Paper rough under my fingers, smelling faintly of ink and old wood. That trail had been shut for years. No patrols, no visitors. Nothing alive should be there. But the second report confirmed it. Same lights, same location. Farther in now. I stepped outside. Cold air hit my face like water. Pine needles rustled softly under my boots. The forest smelled clean, too clean, like rain had washed away time itself. And then I saw them. Lanterns. Not one, not two. A thin line of pale yellow light stretching between the trees, hanging in midair or held by someone I could not see. They moved like fires should. No sway, no flicker in the wind. Just waiting. I followed. Every step deeper made the world quieter. Even the insects had gone still. Even my breath felt muted, swallowed by the trees. The first lantern was close. Too close. A few steps away. But as I walked forward, it drifted farther. I stopped. It stopped too. Then it pulled away again, like it knew I was watching. My boots pressed into damp soil, soft and cold. The ground smelled of pine bark and something faintly metallic underneath, like old rain trapped beneath roots. I kept going. The lanterns kept moving, always just out of reach, always farther than before. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time felt thin here, like it had been stretched too far, and might snap. Then I saw the trail marker, half buried in moss. Wooden, splintered, old. I wiped it clean. My fingers froze. A date was carved into it. Not today, not yesterday. Tomorrow, a full day ahead of me, written in rough, uneven cuts. My chest tightened. The forest around me felt closer now, like the trees had leaned in to listen. A lantern passed directly above my head. No sound, no flame crackle, only a faint warmth that disappeared the moment it moved on. I looked up. It was already gone. The path behind me was gone too. No footprints, no broken branches, only untouched pine needles, smooth like nothing had passed through. The lantern ahead slowed, just once, as if it was waiting for me to understand something. Then it drifted into a narrow opening between two trees. I followed. Inside, the air changed. Damp bark turned to something dry, like old paper left too long in sunlight. My throat tightened without reason. The lantern line ended in a small clearing, and there was only one left, hanging low, barely glowing. It didn't move. I stepped closer. The light inside it trembled, then softened, like a breath, leaving a body. The lantern went out. No flicker, no smoke, just absence. And in that instant, the forest stopped breathing too. No wind, no rustle, no distant branch cracking. Only silence so complete it felt physical. I stood there, staring at the dark space where the lantern had been, waiting, listening, but nothing came. No return glow, no footsteps, no sound from the ranger station radio echoing through the trees. Only the smell of pine, fading slowly into something older, something I could not name. I turned back. The path behind me was no longer marked. The forest looked the same in every direction now, too even, too still, as if it had never allowed a path to exist at all. And somewhere far behind the trees, just beyond hearing, I thought I saw a faint light again. Not ahead, not behind, but above, and then it disappeared, leaving only darkness where direction used to be. The fire lookout cabin sat high above the valley, alone against a slow-moving sea of fog. Morning never felt like morning here. Only a dim shift in light through cold glass. The air smelled of old timber, damp stone, and something faintly like burned wax that no fire had touched in years. I arrived just after dawn, boots heavy on the wooden steps, each plank groaning softly beneath me, like it remembered too much. The porch faced a valley, or what should have been a valley, below. Clouds rested low and thick, swallowing everything beyond the railing. Inside, the cabin was still, dust floating through pale light. A chair, a table, a single untouched guest book resting near the window, and the rocking chair on the porch. It had already moved. Not much, just enough to notice. Its angle shifted from last week's position, facing slightly more toward the door now. I told myself it was wind, even though the air outside did not move. That was the first morning. The second morning, it had changed again, closer this time, rocking a little more forward, like someone had just stood up from it. The porch smelled stronger now, old candle wax drifting through the wood grain, sweet, stale, and impossible. There were no candles in the cabin. I checked every drawer anyway. Nothing, only silence and the soft settling of the building's bones. By the third morning, I noticed footprints, muddy, fresh. They started at the edge of the forest line and walked straight toward the porch, then stopped halfway across the wood, not faded, not dragged away, just ending, as if whoever made them had stepped out of existence mid-step. I stood over them for a long time, the wood beneath my boots cold and slightly damp, the valley wind brushing past without touching anything it shouldn't. Inside, I found the guest book. Its cover was worn smooth, edges soft like it had been held too often. I opened it, pages filled with names, most faded, most unreadable, until I reached the newest entry, dated today. My breath caught without permission. The handwriting was unfamiliar, yet steady, calm, almost familiar in the way it formed letters like someone writing in a place they had known forever. It said only this, still rocking, still waiting. I closed the book too fast. The sound echoed louder than it should have. That night, I did not sleep. I watched the porch through the window. Fog pressed against the glass, thick and slow-moving, like it was breathing. The rocking chair sat empty, still, perfectly still, until just before midnight. Then it moved. Not wind, not vibration. A full, deliberate rock backward, then forward again, like someone invisible had finally decided to sit down. The wood creaked under no weight I could see, but I felt it anyway. A pressure in the air, subtle and close, like standing beside a person in the dark. The smell of candle wax deepened, sweet, old, warm, impossible in the cold night. I stepped closer to the window. The chair rocked again, slower now, like it was listening. I whispered nothing, didn't mean to speak, didn't mean to think aloud, but the silence answered anyway. Not with words, with movement. The chair stopped, dead still, and for a moment, everything felt balanced again. Fog, wood, valley, breath. Then the guest book fell off the table inside the cabin. No wind, no impact, just a slow slide to the floor, like it had been gently closed by unseen hands. I turned toward it, and when I looked back at the porch, the chair was facing directly toward me now. Empty, waiting, rocking once more, very slightly, like it had just been told I was finally paying attention. The forest road narrowed until it felt less like a path and more like a memory trying to disappear. Evening settled early here, thick and gray, pressing to the trees like damp cloth. The picnic area came into view just after sunset. Old wooden tables, weathered benches, a rusted grill locked shut years ago. Everything smelled of dry grass and faint wildflowers that should not have survived this long. I stopped at the entrance sign. Closed after dusk. No exceptions. The paint was peeling. The letters looked freshly traced, as if someone had rewritten them recently with careful patience. No wind moved through the clearing, yet something about the place felt occupied. I stepped inside anyway. The air changed immediately. Sweetness lingered there, like crushed petals left too long under sunlight, mixed with cold soil and old wood soaked in rain that never fully dried. The tables were wrong. That was the first thing I noticed. They had been rearranged, not randomly, deliberately, forming a loose circle facing inward toward nothing. I checked my logbook, recorded their positions earlier that morning. Straight lines then, ordered, empty. Now they looked arranged for listening. I circled the area slowly, boots brushing gravel that felt softer than it should have been, almost warm beneath my steps. Then I heard it, voices, faint at first. Distant laughter carried through the trees like it belonged to another time. I froze. The forest around me stayed still, branches unmoving, leaves silent, but the voices continued, talking over one another, soft, casual, almost cheerful, coming from nowhere. I walked toward the storage shed, locked, chained tight, rusted, yet the voices grew clearer as I approached. Inside, something shifted. A child laughing, not echoing, present, close. I pressed my ear to the door. Warmth hit my skin through the metal, as if something on the other side was breathing against it. The laughter stopped. Silence followed immediately. Too clean, too complete. Then, very softly, a chair scraped the ground inside. I stepped back. The shed door remained locked, but the air around it felt occupied, like a room had formed where no room existed. I walked around the picnic area again. The voices had moved, now coming from the tables, from the circle, from everywhere at once, talking without speaking, remembering without sound. I stopped in the center. The air there was warmer, almost alive, carrying the faint scent of dried flowers crushed underfoot. A bench creaked behind me. I turned, empty, yet the sound continued, slow rocking motion, like someone had just sat down and leaned back. Then another voice emerged, closer, a child's whisper, right behind the storage shed. I moved carefully. The door was unchanged, locked, still, but something inside had shifted again. A faint glow leaked through the cracks beneath it, warm, golden, alive. I hesitated, then opened the door. The smell hit first. Old wood, warm air, and something like sunlight trapped too long in a closed space. Inside, nothing. No storage boxes, no tools, only a single chair, sitting perfectly in the center, still warm, as if someone had just stood up from it seconds ago. The child's laughter returned, soft, fading, satisfied, not from inside the shed, from everywhere outside it. The picnic tables were empty now, reordered again, facing the shed, all of them, perfect alignment, as if waiting for something to continue. I stepped backward slowly. The door swung shut on its own. No wind, no force, just a quiet, final movement like an answer being sealed away. And as I turned back toward the forest road, one last whisper passed through the clearing, not spoken, remembered, just a single word, almost lost in the dry grass and fading light. The meadow appeared suddenly after a long stretch of forest road, as if the trees had simply stepped aside to let it exist. Late afternoon light, lay across the grass in a dull, golden sheet. The air smelled of rain-soaked earth, though the sky above was completely clear. I stopped at the edge of the clearing. No wind, no insects, only a heavy stillness pressing into the grass like something was watching through it. That was when I saw the deer. It stood in the center of the meadow, completely still, not grazing, not moving, not shifting its weight, just standing, facing me. Its body was pale in the fading light, coat almost gray against the green. Its eyes caught the sun, but did not reflect it like they should have. I waited for it to move. It didn't. I checked my notes, thinking maybe it was injured. Wildlife complaints had come in for weeks about this area. Strange sightings, unnatural stillness. But nothing in the reports said it never moved at all. I stepped forward once. Grass pressed softly under my boot. Damp, cool, like the ground had just been watered from below. The deer did not react, not even a blink. Another step, still nothing. The air changed slightly as I entered the meadow. The scent of wet earth deepened, almost metallic beneath the surface, like rain had mixed with something older. I stopped halfway in. The deer was closer now, too close, its head tilted just slightly, not in motion, but in awareness, as if it had always been tilted like that. Watching, always watching. I raised my camera, took a photo. The shutter clicked loud in the silence. The deer did not move, but when I checked the screen, it was closer than before, not in the frame, in position. I lowered the camera. My pulse felt heavier than my breath. I turned slowly. The forest edge behind me looked normal. Trees, shadows, still air, but something about the meadow no longer matched it. The grass here didn't sway the same way. It didn't react to pressure. It returned to shape too slowly, like memory instead of matter. I looked back at the deer. It had not moved, yet it felt nearer again. Not physically, just wrong in space. I tried another photo. Same result. Each image showed it slightly closer than the last. Even when I knew it hadn't moved, the sun dropped lower. Light stretched long across the meadow. Shadows deepened under the deer's legs. Only there were no shifting shadows. Just one continuous dark shape beneath it. No separation. No change. As if the deer was not casting a shadow, but standing inside one. I stepped back slowly. Grass bent under my boots with a soft, wet sound. The deer still watched. No blink. No breath visible. Nothing that confirmed life. And yet it felt more aware than anything alive should be. I turned fully this time. Walked toward the forest edge. Each step heavier than the last. The air behind me grew quieter with every movement. Not empty. Focused. I reached the trees. Stopped. Looked back once. The deer was still there. Exactly where it had been. But now I understood something I could not explain. It was not in the meadow. The meadow was around it. The grass, the light. The air itself, all arranged in response to its presence. I stepped into the forest. The moment I did, the sound returned. Leaves, distant wind, normal rhythm. But the meadow behind me did not change. It remained still, held, pinned in place. That night, I reviewed the photos, one after another. Each image showed the deer in a slightly different position. Closer, always closer, until the final image, taken after I had already left. In it, the deer was no longer in the meadow. It was behind me, standing at the forest edge, facing the camera, facing me. Even though I remembered clearly, there had been nothing behind me when I took it, only trees, and silence that did not belong to anything living. The road to Cabin 7 was barely a road anymore, more like a thin scar through the forest, half swallowed by roots and time. Evening light slipped between the trees in long, pale streaks. The air smelled of old fabric and dust, like something sealed away for too long had finally started breathing again. The cabin appeared without warning, small, weathered, leaning slightly toward the lake below the ridge. Its windows were dark but not empty. Something about them felt recently used. The wood steps creaked under my weight as I climbed. Each sound lingered too long, like the cabin was remembering it. Inside, the air was heavier, Dust floated in slow motion through narrow beams of light. The smell of aged cloth filled every corner, stale, dry, and faintly sweet like forgotten storage. Furniture sat untouched for years. And yet, nothing felt abandoned. That was the wrong part. On the main table lay journals. Dozens of them, stacked neatly, not scattered, not forgotten in chaos. Organized, like someone had cared enough to keep them in order. I picked one up. Its cover was soft from use, edges darkened by hands that should not have been here recently. The pages inside were filled with handwriting, different inks, different dates. Some entries were decades old. Others were not. I checked the timestamps again. Impossible. Some were written yesterday, in a cabin that had been listed as abandoned for years. A cold pressure settled in my chest. I turned page after page. The writing described daily life, weather, visitors, small details. But slowly it shifted. The tone changed. Less observation, more prediction. One entry described a storm that had not yet formed. Another mentioned a ranger arriving at dusk. A ranger who matched my description. I paused. The ink in the next entry looked fresher than the rest. Still dark, still wet in memory. It read, "He is here now, the one who checks the dust first." My fingers tightened around the page. The cabin felt closer somehow. Walls less stable. Air heavier, like it was adjusting itself around me. I checked the other journals. Same pattern. Older entries predicting newer ones. Newer entries reacting to events that had not yet happened. Then I found the last journal. It was different, smaller, almost hidden beneath the others. Its cover was smoother, like it had been handled constantly. The final pages were filled only with recent writing. Very recent. The ink still looked alive. I turned to the last entry. My breath slowed without permission. It described me entering cabin 7. Step by step. The creak of the stairs. The pause at the door. The way I would look at the journals before touching them. Every detail matched exactly what had already happened, down to the dust floating in the light. My throat tightened. I flipped forward. The next page was dated today, but only partially filled. The writing continued mid-sentence, as if the hand had stopped suddenly. It read, "He is standing by the table now. He is reading this. He does not understand yet that the cabin is all ready." The sentence broke there, ink trailing off into nothing. No correction. No second line. Just absence. I looked around the cabin. The silence felt different now. Not empty. Aware. The journals on the table shifted slightly. Not physically moving, but visually wrong, as if their positions had updated without changing. I stepped back. Floorboards creaked softly beneath me, but the sound came twice. Once from my feet, and once the half-second later, from somewhere else in the room. I froze. The air smelled suddenly stronger. Dust, cloth, and something like ink spilled too long ago to still be wet. I turned slowly toward the window. Outside, the lake reflected nothing clearly, just blurred gray light and motionless water. But in the glass reflection, I saw the cabin again, slightly different. The table was cleaner, the journals more recent, and someone standing where I was standing now, reading. I turned back quickly. No one there, only the table, only the books, only me. But the sense of being observed did not leave. It deepened. I reached for the last journal again. My hand stopped before touching it. Something inside it had changed. The final page was no longer incomplete. New ink had appeared, fresh, immediate, as if written while I was looking away for a single second. It now read, "He has reached the last line. He is about to realize there was never a first." The cabin light dimmed slightly, not from the sun, from something internal, like the room itself had exhaled. I stepped backward toward the door. Each movement felt delayed, like the cabin was processing it before allowing it to happen. The journals remained still, but I knew they were no longer waiting. They were continuing, even without me. As I reached the doorway, one final sound came from behind the table. A page turning, slow, careful, as if someone had just decided the story was not finished yet. The Forest Service map was spread across the dashboard. Edges curled from old humidity and cold air. The headlights cut through a narrow ribbon of night, illuminating a road that should not have existed like this. Cold wind slipped through the cracked window. It carried the faint smell of motor oil, though there were no machines nearby. Only trees. Only silence. The road was marked as straight on every official record. A simple line cutting through protected forest land, ending at an old maintenance junction. But what I was driving on did not stay straight. It shifted, not visibly at first, not in a way the eyes could trust. The wheel stayed steady. The tires hummed over gravel and broken asphalt, yet the distance ahead kept changing shape. Landmarks appeared where none had been logged. A rusted milepost on the left side of the road, then again on the right, a few minutes later. I slowed down. The engine responded late, like it was thinking before obeying. The smell of motor oil grew stronger, not fresh, old, warmed by invisible heat beneath the ground. I checked the GPS. No signal, only a blank screen reflecting my face in faint blue light. Then the radio clicked. Once, static filled the cabin like a breath drawn too close. I reached to turn it off, but it changed before my hand touched it. A voice, not speaking directly, more like words forming inside interference. Coordinates I didn't recognize. Then a pause. Then my name, my full name, spoken as if it had been waiting behind the noise for a long time. I pulled over. The tires stopped too smoothly. No crunch, no resistance, just a soft surrender to the gravel. Outside, the forest stood too evenly spaced, like it had been arranged instead of grown. The road sign ahead tilted slightly. It was old, wooden, faded, but the letters had been freshly carved, not painted, cut. I stepped closer. The smell of sap and fresh wood rose from it, sharp and clean. The sign read something impossible. A name I hadn't heard since childhood. Not my official name. The one no one used anymore. The one I had almost forgotten. A chill moved through the air behind me. Slow. Patient. I turned. Nothing. Only the road stretching backward into darkness. But the feeling remained. Like something had just recognized me. I returned to the car. The engine started without hesitation this time. Too easily. As if it had been waiting for permission I hadn't given. I drove again. The road should have led west. It turned east. Without curves. Without warning. Just direction changing under the tires. Trees began to shift closer to the road. Then farther away. Then closer again. Not moving. Rearranging. The horizon felt unstable, like it was being redrawn in real time. The motor oil smell became constant now. Not from outside. From inside the vents. Warm. Metallic. Present. The radio turned on again by itself. Static at first. Then a clear voice reading something that sounded like a report. Arrival confirmed, subject approaching site. A pause. Then, he is remembering the road incorrectly. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. My knuckles pale under the dashboard light. The road dipped slightly. Then rose. Then ended. Not gradually. Not naturally. Just a sudden stop in the shape of space itself. I braked hard. The car stopped just before a gate. Except there was no fence. No structure. Only two metal posts standing alone in the forest. Holding nothing. Yet acting like they belonged to something larger. I stepped out. Cold air wrapped around me immediately. The smell of motor oil faded here, replaced by something drier. Old stone. Old iron. Like a place that had been erased, but not removed. The gate posts stood taller up close. Their paint peeled in vertical strips, revealing rust beneath. Carved into one of them was a second name. Not mine this time, but familiar in a way I couldn't place. Like hearing a word you once knew, but never spoke again. The forest beyond the gate looked normal. Too normal. Evenly spaced trees. Soft ground. Quiet depth. But the road behind me was gone. I turned. Where I had driven in, there was only forest now. No tire marks. No gravel. No exit. Just trees standing too politely. As if nothing had ever entered. I looked back at the gate. It creaked once, even without wind. A slow, patient sound. Not opening. Not closing. Just acknowledging presence. The air felt heavier near it, like passing through would require forgetting something important. Something I had not yet realized I was carrying. The radio in the car crackled again behind me. One last transmission. Short, clear, calm. He has arrived at the boundary he has already crossed. Then silence. Complete. The forest ahead waited. Still, and for the first time, I was no longer sure which side of the gate I had started from. The ranger dormitory stood at the edge of the tree line, half swallowed by creeping moss and fading paint. Evening light slipped across its walls in thin, broken layers. The air smelled of old paint, dry wood, and something faintly metallic, like time itself had started corroding the building from the inside. I arrived just before dusk. The structure had 4 windows facing the forest. 3 reflected the world normally. Trees, sky, distance. The 4th did not. That was the first thing I noticed. The glass in that window was darker, not broken, not fogged, just wrong, like it didn't belong to the same layer of air. Inside, the dormitory was quiet in a way that felt preserved rather than abandoned. Beds lined the hallway, blankets folded too neatly. Dust floated through slanted light beams, slow and weightless. The smell of cedar beams filled every room, warm at first inhale, then strangely stale, like the wood had been sealed off from time too long ago. I walked down the corridor. Each step echoed once. Then again, a delayed echo followed me by half a second, like the building was replaying me slightly out of sync. I stopped. The second echo stopped too. The dorm stayed still. Listening, I reached the end hallway where all 4 windows faced outward. 3 of them showed the forest normally. Wind-moving leaves, shadows shifting gently, everything behaving like it should. The 4th window showed none of that. At first, it looked empty, just black glass. Then I saw movement, not outside the building, inside the reflection. A figure stood among the trees, but only in the mirror, not in reality. I stepped closer. The reflection sharpened slightly, as if it was adjusting focus just for me. The figure did not move. It stood between 2 trunks, facing the dormitory, watching. But when I turned my head toward the actual forest outside, there was nothing, only trees, only still air. I looked back at the window. The figure had shifted closer, not walking, just relocated. Instantly, its posture remained unchanged, head slightly tilted, arms loose, still observing. I placed my hand near the glass. The surface felt cold, too cold for evening air, almost wet, though nothing was visible. Behind me, the dorm hallway creaked softly. One floorboard, then another, slow, unmeasured. I turned, nothing there, but the sound continued, approaching, from different parts of the building at once. Not footsteps, repetition, like the structure was remembering movement instead of receiving it. I faced the window again. The figure had moved closer still, now standing just beyond the reflected edge of the trees, closer than before, too close to the depth shown in the glass. I realized something then. The reflection was not mirroring the forest. It was revealing another version of it, one layer just beneath the real one. I leaned in, the cedar smell deepened, and beneath it, something else. Damp earth. Oh, there! A faint trace of breath that didn't belong to me. The figure lifted its head, slightly, not looking at the forest, looking directly at the glass. Directly at me. I stepped back. The hallway creaked again, closer this time. Behind me, I didn't turn. I couldn't, because in the reflection now, there was a second figure inside the dormitory itself, standing in the hallway, where I was standing, but a fraction of a second behind me, copying my stillness. I stayed motionless. The reflection kept moving without me. The figure inside the glass lifted its arm slowly, pointing, not outward, not at the forest, but at the 4th window itself, the one I was already watching. The glass darkened further, as if responding, as if acknowledging attention. The forest reflection vanished completely, replaced by darkness. Then a single shape emerged in that darkness. Not the figure anymore. Something larger, closer, pressing toward the glass from the other side. I stepped back instinctively. The hallway creaked again. Behind me, very close now, but when I turned, there was only empty space. No presence, no movement, only the 4 windows. 3 normal, 1 completely black. And in that black window, a faint outline forming slowly. Not inside the forest, not outside the building, but somewhere in between. Waiting for the moment, I stopped distinguishing which side I was on. The bridge was older than it should have been allowed to be. Wooden beams stretched across a shallow stream that barely moved anymore, like the water had forgotten how to flow properly. Late night settled over the forest in a heavy, quiet way. No insects, no wind, only a stillness that felt pressed into ground. The air smelled of cold stone and river water. Damp, sharp, almost clean, but not comforting. I stopped at the edge of the bridge. The planks looked worn smooth by time, not footsteps, like something had passed over them often enough to erase intention itself. I stepped onto the wood. It creaked softly, once, then again, slightly delayed, as if the bridge was confirming my weight after I had already moved. The stream below reflected nothing clearly, just broken patches of dark water and pale sky that didn't match the night above. I crossed halfway. That was when I heard it. A hum, low, thin, almost musical. It came from beneath the bridge. Not loud, not close, but present enough to settle into the ribs. I stopped. The hum continued. It didn't repeat like a song. It shifted like memory, trying to find the right shape. I leaned over the edge. Dark water, slow current, stones beneath the surface. Nothing visible, but the sound grew clearer. Like someone beneath the bridge was humming a tune they almost remembered correctly, each note slightly wrong, each pause too long. I straightened slowly. The bridge creaked again, but this time no echo followed. Only the hum remained. I moved forward again. 1 step, then another. The sound changed slightly as I crossed. Now it wasn't just beneath me. It was around me, inside the wood, inside the air, like the bridge itself was remembering the melody. I reached the center, stopped. The hum paused for half a second. Complete silence, then resumed, closer, more confident. I looked down again. The water's surface shifted faintly. Even without wind, ripples formed where nothing touched. And in those ripples, I thought I saw shapes, not reflections, suggestions, like something was trying to form an image using broken water. I stepped backward instinctively. The bridge responded. A soft groan ran through its length, not structural, intentional, like it disliked the movement. I froze again. The hum stopped. The silence that followed felt heavier than the sound. Then, very softly, something scratched beneath me. I looked down. The planks were unchanged. But the sound came again. Scrape. Pause. Scrape. Like something writing from underneath. I dropped to one knee. Pressed my ear near the wood. The smell of damp timber rose stronger. Old. Saturated. Alive in a way it shouldn't be. The humming returned. Now clearer. Now closer. Now layered. As if multiple versions of the same tune were being sung at once. Slightly out of sync. I pulled back. The bridge creaked again, this time louder, and beneath it, a faint tapping. Not random, rhythmic, like counting. I stood quickly. The hum stopped instantly. Everything went still, even the water. Even my breath felt suspended. Then I noticed something carved into the railing. Fresh, the wood around it still pale. Dozens of initials, scratched into the surface in tight, uneven clusters. Some old, some new, some so fresh the splinters hadn't settled. I traced them with my eyes, and stopped. One set of initials matched mine. Exactly. Same order, same spacing, as if I had written them without remembering. My hand pulled back instinctively. The bridge shifted slightly beneath me, not collapsing, adjusting, like it had registered recognition. The hum returned, but now it wasn't below anymore. It was beside me, inside the railing, inside the posts, inside the air itself. I stepped backward toward the far end. The scratching sound resumed underneath the planks. Faster now, urgent, not random anymore. directional. Following me, the stream below darkened slightly, though no cloud had moved overhead. The water felt deeper, without changing shape, like distance had increased inside it. I reached the far end of the bridge, stepped off quickly. The moment my foot left the wood, the hum stopped. Instantly, like something had been cut off mid-thought. I turned back. The bridge was still. Normal. Silent. Too silent. The initials on the railing no longer looked random. They formed a pattern now. A sequence, leading from one end of the bridge to the other, like a sentence written in pieces. And mine sat in the middle, not as the start, not as the end, just continuation. The stream below reflected nothing at all now, only darkness, no movement, no depth, and from somewhere beneath that darkness, I thought I heard the hum one last time, not singing, not remembering, just waiting for the next step above it to answer. The fire tower stood alone above the tree line, rising into a cold sky that had no stars left to show. Night wrapped around it like a slow, patient weight. Metal steps creaked under my boots as I climbed. Each step echoed upward, then returned a fraction too late, as if the tower was replaying my movement after it had already happened. The air smelled of old smoke. Not fresh burning, but something long extinguished that still refused to fully disappear. At the top, the cabin was small. Glass windows on all sides. Endless forest stretching in every direction. A view that should have felt open. Instead, it felt watched. The stove inside was cold. Ash sat in its base like forgotten snow. Yet the smell of burning would lingered anyway. Faint, constant, impossible to place. I set my radio down on the table. No signal, no activity, just static waiting in silence. Then the phone rang. It shouldn't have. The line had been disconnected years ago. Emergency communication, removed from service, logged and sealed. But the sound was clear, sharp, immediate. I stared at it for a moment longer than I should have, then picked it up. Nothing on the other end, only breathing, slow, steady, close enough to feel like it was happening in the same room. I didn't speak. Neither did it. The breathing continued, measured, calm, almost patient, like it had been waiting for me to learn how long I could stay silent. I looked out the window while holding the receiver. The forest below was still, too still. No wind, no motion, no shift in branches. Only darkness layered over darkness. Then the breathing changed slightly. Not louder, closer. I pulled the receiver away from my ear. The line stayed open, still breathing. But now I could hear something else behind it. A faint metallic crackle, like the inside of a radio slowly warming up. Then a whisper formed inside the static. My name, not called, confirmed. I stepped back from the table. The tower creaked softly around me, not from wind, from structure adjusting itself. The phone cord stretched slightly across the desk. Even though I had not moved it, I looked at it. The line was no longer coiled properly. It was extended, like something had been holding it longer than it should physically allow. The breathing stopped. Complete silence followed. Too complete. Then the radio clicked on by itself. Static filled the room again, but this time organized, structured, like a voice trying to form through interference. A transmission began. Weather advisory. The words were calm. Too calm. Conditions expected to worsen after midnight. I glanced outside. The sky had not changed, but the feeling had. Like time had shifted slightly forward without telling the night. The voice continued. Visibility will reduce to 0 in affected areas. A pause. Then, my name again, not from the phone this time, from the radio, spoken clearly through static, as if the device had corrected itself to speak directly to me. I froze. The forest below the tower darkened subtly, not in brightness, in definition. Edges became uncertain. Depth became uncertain. The radio continued. Now no longer weather. Now description. Subject located in elevated structure. My grip tightened on the desk. The tower creaked again, louder this time, from above me, but there was no upper level. Only roof, only metal, only sealed space. Still, The sound came from above. Slow footsteps. Measured, not climbing. Already there. The phone rang again. Instantly. I didn't touch it, but it rang anyway. The breathing returned. Same rhythm. Same presence. But now, layered with something else. A second breath underneath it. Then a third. All slightly out of sync. Like multiple versions of the same moment were overlapping. I stepped toward the window. Looked down. The forest had changed. Not physically. Positionally. Landmarks shifted slightly out of alignment. Paths that should have been straight were now angled incorrectly. The world looked rewritten. The radio spoke again. Subject responding to transmission. I turned slowly. The phone receiver lifted slightly on its own. Not fully off the hook. Just enough to suggest it was being held from the other side. The breathing stopped again. Then a voice spoke. Not through the radio. Not through the phone. From inside the tower walls. Soft. Clear. Close. My name. Said correctly. As if it had always known how I would react. The tower lights flickered once. Then stabilized. But the feeling of presence did not leave. It expanded. Like the structure itself had become aware of me inside it. I stepped back toward the center of the room. Every surface felt slightly closer than before. The walls, the desk, the glass. Even the air felt reduced. The radio clicked one final time. A final message. Short, precise. Arrival complete. Silence followed immediately. No static. No breathing. No wind. Only the sound of the tower settling into stillness around me. And somewhere above the ceiling, I could not see. The footsteps stopped, as if whatever had been walking there had finally reached a point where it no longer needed to move at all. The search and rescue archive smelled like wet paper and old leather. Dust hung in the air under weak yellow lights, drifting slowly like something suspended in time. Rows of cabinets stretched into the back room, each drawer labeled, each file carefully preserved. Yet nothing about the place felt organized in a way that belonged to present. Only memory, only residue. I sat at the central desk, flipping through photograph folders that should have been ordinary. Missing persons, recovery attempts, field reports. But something was wrong in the repetition. The same man appeared again, and again, not in every photo, but often enough to become impossible to ignore. He stood at the edge of scenes where no one had recorded him, behind trees, near rescue teams, at the far end of trails, always slightly out of focus, always unnoticed by everyone else. I held one photograph closer. A rescue team from 20 years ago. Snow-covered ground, emergency gear, flashlight beams cutting through fog. And there he was, standing behind them, watching. No one reacted to him. No one turned. I checked the file date. Correct. I moved to another folder. Different decade, different uniforms, different equipment. Same man, same position in the frame. My fingers grew colder with each page. The smell in the room shifted slightly. Leather equipment, wet leaves, old fabric soaked in rain that never fully dried. Like the forest itself had entered the archive and refused to leave. I opened a newer folder. Digital prints this time. Higher resolution, clearer detail. And again, him, but closer, more defined, no longer at the edge of images, now within them, standing directly behind subjects who never acknowledged his presence. I leaned back slightly in my chair. The room creaked softly in response. The ceiling light flickered once, then steadied. I told myself it was pattern bias. Old archives always produce repetition when you look long enough, but the pattern did not break. It tightened. I opened the most recent folder. The smell of wet leaves intensified. Too sudden, too close. The newest images showed recent search operations, only a few months old. I recognized some of the terrain, some of the teams, and again, the man. But now he was no longer distant. He stood just a few steps behind the search crews, almost within arm's reach, still ignored, still unseen, except by the camera. I flipped to the last photograph in the folder. My breath slowed. The image was recent, too recent. I recognized the clearing instantly, a site I had visited personally during field inspection. Same trees, same light angle, same equipment setup. But in the photograph, I was there, standing in frame, looking slightly downward at the ground. And behind me, the man stood closer than anyone else had ever seen him, almost directly behind my shoulder. His face was clearer than before, not threatening, not expressive, just aware, as if he had finally reached the correct distance after decades of adjustment. I lowered the photo slowly. The archive room felt tighter now. The shelves seemed closer together, the air heavier. The smell of leather and wet leaves intensified until it felt like the room itself had stepped outside and come back altered. I checked the metadata on the photograph again. Date confirmed. Location confirmed. Everything matched reality, except my memory. I did not remember that moment being photographed, or him being there. A soft creak came from the back of the archive. I froze. The sound was slow, measured, like someone shifting weight from one foot to another after standing still for a long time. I turned slightly. Nothing in the hallway. Only cabinets. Only silence. But the smell changed again, now mixed with something warmer, like damp cloth left near heat. The radio on the desk clicked once. I hadn't touched it. Static filled the room, then stopped. A voice formed through it, not clear at first. Fragmented. Subject documented. A pause. Then, presence confirmed across timeline. I looked at the photographs again. The man was no longer only behind me in the last image. In the newer prints, he appeared earlier in time, closer in every version, as if the past itself was adjusting his position to match a fixed outcome. The archive lights flickered again, this time longer. When they returned, one cabinet drawer was slightly open. I hadn't touched it. The smell of wet leaves deepened near it. I stood slowly, approached the drawer. The metal handle was cold, too cold for a room that had been closed all day. I pulled it open. Inside were photographs I had never seen cataloged. Recent prints, all of them showing the same scene. Different angles, same result. Me, always me. And behind me, the man, now no longer distant, now no longer behind crowds, now always positioned exactly where I had been moments before each photo was taken. The final photograph in the drawer was different. It showed the archive room itself, empty except for one detail. A figure standing where I was standing now, looking directly at the camera, already aware it had been found. The road ended long before the map said it should have. After that, there was only footpath, soft earth, uneven roots, and silence that felt layered on top of itself. Night had already settled, though the sky refused to confirm it. No stars, no clear horizon, just a dull, heavy ceiling of dark. The smell of fresh coffee grounds drifted through the air. That was the first wrong detail. Warm, bitter, immediate, like someone had just finished brewing a cup in the middle of nowhere, but there was no one here. Only trees tightening around a trail as I moved deeper in. The campsite appeared without warning. Not a clearing I approached, but a space I suddenly stood inside. Tents arranged in a loose circle. Fire pit cold. Chairs slightly angled toward nothing. Everything looked recently used. Too recently. The smell of coffee grew stronger near the center. I checked my watch. It read 4:58 a.m. That didn't make sense. The sky above should have been shifting toward dawn, but it wasn't. It remained dark, unchanged, as if morning had been scheduled and then quietly removed. I stepped closer to the fire pit. Ash inside it was still warm, not glowing, not burning, just warm enough to suggest it had been active moments ago. I crouched near it. The air smelled like brewed coffee again. Fresh, steaming, real, yet there was no cup, no pot, no source. A tent flap moved slightly behind me. I turned quickly. Empty movement. No wind, no disturbance. Just the fabric settling as if something had exited without opening it. I walked between tents, each one identical in arrangement but slightly different in detail. A sleeping bag folded in one, a backpack left half open in another, a flashlight still on, pointed toward the ground. But no people, only traces of presence. The smell of coffee followed me everywhere. warm enough to feel like it was coming from my own breath. I stopped near the edge of the campsite. The forest beyond looked normal. Too normal. That was always the problem. Normal meant nothing here could be trusted. My watch ticked forward. 4:59 a.m., then stopped, frozen. The second hand held in place. Not broken, just paused, as if time had decided to hesitate. A low hum began near the ground. Faint, almost internal. I looked down. Dirt and pine needles. Nothing visible. But the hum grew stronger when I stayed still. Weaker when I moved. I stepped back toward the center. The hum followed, not moving physically, but adjusting in intensity around me. I looked at the tents again. Something had changed. The arrangement felt tighter now, closer together, as if the campsite had contracted slightly. I checked my watch again. Still 4:59 a.m. Still frozen. The coffee smell intensified. Now almost overwhelming. Not just scent anymore. Presence, like warmth without temperature. I walked toward one of the tents. Zipper half open. Inside, empty, but warm, as if someone had just been sitting there. I pulled my hand back immediately. The fabric felt slightly damp. Not from water. From condensation that hadn't decided whether it belonged to air or memory. A faint sound came from the fire pit area. Not crackling. Not movement. Breathing. I turned slowly. The fire pit was empty. Still, but the ashen side shifted slightly. Not disturbed by wind. Rearranged. Into a shape. Circular. Like a cup mark pressed into time itself. The hum underfoot grew stronger. Now rhythmic. Not random. Structured. Like something counting upward but refusing to finish. I stepped backward. The campsite reacted. Subtly, the tents leaned inward by a fraction of an angle, not physically bending, but visually reorienting, like perception was being guided. My watch clicked once, then resumed. 4:59 a.m. Again, reset. The second hand moved backward slightly before freezing again. I stepped toward the edge of the campsite. The forest beyond it looked unchanged, but the boundary felt heavier, like stepping out would require permission. The coffee smell faded slightly as I moved away from the center, then returned instantly when I stopped. I turned back toward the tents. Something new had appeared. A chair near the fire pit. Wooden. Simple. Not there before. I am certain. The hum under the ground rose in pitch. The chair creaked once. No one in it, but it moved anyway. A single slow adjustment backward, like someone settling in. I did not approach. The campsite lights, small lanterns hanging from hooks, flickered once, then stabilized, but their glow felt dimmer, more distant, as if the idea of light had been reduced rather than the light itself. My watch ticked again, 4:59 a.m., but this time the sound was delayed. The tick arrived half a second after it should have. Then again, and again. The campsite was no longer just stuck in time. It was echoing it. I stepped carefully toward the exit path. The hum followed. Not louder, just closer. Inside everything. I reached the edge. Stopped. Turned once more. The tents were still there. The fire pit still cold. The chair still slightly shifted. And in the center of it all, the coffee smell lingered strongest. Warm. Fresh. Impossible. As if morning was happening here constantly, but only just out of reach. The ranger station was quiet in a way that felt practiced, like silence had been maintained here for a long time, carefully, deliberately. Night pressed against the windows in a soft, unmoving sheet. The air inside smelled of cedar beams and old paper, dry, warm, and slightly sweet with age. I sat at the desk beneath the main corridor, paper logs stacked neatly beside the radio. A small lamp casting pale circles of light across the floorboards. That was when I heard it. Footsteps. Above me. Slow. Heavy. Measuring the space like they knew exactly where they were going. I looked up. Ceiling solid. Wooden beams. No hatch. No attic door. Nothing that should allow movement above. The footsteps continued. Not random pacing. A route. The same path repeated every few seconds, slightly shifted each time, as if mapping the ceiling from memory. I stood slowly. The sound paused, then resumed. I took one step. The footsteps above matched it, delayed by half a breath. Not copying, responding. The smell of cedar grew stronger, warm, resin-like, as if the wood itself had been freshly cut somewhere out of sight. I walked into the hallway. Each step echoed softly. Each echo returned from above a moment later. The ceiling boards creaked in patterns now, not structural strain. Movement, intentional movement. I pressed my hand against the wall. It was warm, not room temperature. Warmer, like something behind it had been there recently, or still was. I checked the building blueprints pinned near the office. Old paper, faded ink, every corridor, every room. I traced the outline slowly. My fingers stopped. The attic, there was none. No access point, no stairs, no hatch, no construction record above this level. The building ended here, according to every official plan. But the footsteps above did not agree. They continued, uninterrupted, now slower, closer. I stepped back into the main room. The lamp flickered once, not from electrical failure, from timing, like something had passed through the circuit briefly and left. The footsteps above stopped. Complete silence followed, too complete, the kind that made the air feel thinner. Then, one step, right above me, directly centered. The floor beneath me vibrated faintly, not enough to shake anything, just enough to confirm contact. I froze. The cedar smell deepened, now mixed with something else. Dust that hadn't been disturbed in a long time, suddenly disturbed all at once. The radio clicked on by itself. Static filled the room. Then a soft transmission formed through it. Structure occupancy detected. A pause. The footsteps resumed. But now they were no longer walking. They were aligning, each step placed with precision, like something was measuring the exact boundaries of the ceiling above me. I moved toward the hallway again, slowly, carefully. The footsteps followed my movement perfectly, not faster, not slower, matched. I stopped near the center of the building. Everything above went still. Then, a single step, different location, not above my head, slightly forward. The structure groaned faintly. Not breaking, adjusting. I looked up again. The ceiling looked unchanged, but the sound no longer felt above it. It felt inside it, like the wood was no longer a barrier, just a surface layer. The smell of cedar intensified sharply, almost overwhelming. I coughed once. The footsteps paused again. Then something different happened. A new sound. Not footsteps. Dragging. Slow. Careful. As if something was repositioning itself across beams that were never meant to exist. The radio hissed again. Access point not recorded. Then silence. The lamp flickered. When it stabilized, the shadow on the ceiling was wrong. Not cast by anything visible. Just present. Shifting slightly out of sync with the room below. I stepped back instinctively. The shadow moved independently. One slow shift across the ceiling boards. Then stopped directly above me. I did not breathe for a moment. The house settled. Every creak stopped. Even the air felt paused. Then very softly, a knock came from above. One. Careful. Testing. I stepped backward again. The knock was repeated. Same location. Same rhythm. Not communication. Confirmation. The radio clicked one final time. A message broke through static. Short. Clear. Presence confirmed overhead. Then silence. The footsteps returned. Not walking now. Standing. Centered directly above me. Perfectly still. As if whatever was up there had finally found the exact point where it no longer needed to move at all. The clearing opened suddenly, like the forest had stepped aside to reveal something it had been hiding for a long time. Late afternoon light lay flat across the grass, pale and unmoving. The air smelled of dry grass and sun-warmed earth. Soft, clean, almost peaceful, but too still to be trusted. I stopped at the edge. The field was full of birds. Hundreds of them, standing, not flying, not scattered, not pecking or shifting or reacting, just standing across the grass like they had been placed there carefully, each one perfectly still. No wind moved through their feathers. No rustle broke the silence. only the weight of watching. I stepped forward slowly. Grass bent under my boots with a faint dry sound. The ground felt warm, like it had been holding sunlight for too long without release. None of the birds reacted. Not a single head turned. Not a single blink I could detect. I kept walking. The closer I got, the more unnatural the stillness became. It wasn't just silence. It was refusal, as if movement itself had been paused and never restarted. The smell of dry grass intensified, mixed with something faintly sweet beneath it, like pollen or crushed leaves lingering too long in one place. I stopped halfway into the field. The birds surrounded me now, not tightly, but evenly spaced, forming an unspoken geometry around my position. I looked around slowly. Nothing moved, not even insects, not even air. Then I noticed something. They were all facing the same direction, every single bird, aligned, not toward me, not away from me, toward a point deeper in the forest beyond the field, a place I cannot see clearly from here. I tried to follow their direction with my eyes. The trees beyond the clearing looked normal, too normal, but the way the birds faced them suggested something else was there, something they were refusing to acknowledge aloud. A faint pressure settled in my chest. Not fear exactly, recognition of pattern. I stepped forward again. The birds did not react, but the silence changed. It deepened, like my movement had been noticed but not answered. I took another step. Grass shifted softly. Still no response. Then a single feather fell, slowly, from above. No bird moved. No wing flapped. But the feather drifted down between them like it had been released from somewhere outside of motion. It landed near my boot. I did not pick it up. The air felt heavier now. The birds remained frozen. But something about them had changed. Not position. Presence. As if they were no longer just bodies occupying space, but markers of something being observed. I turned slightly. The field seemed larger than before. Not physically expanded, but visually stretched. Like distance had become uncertain. The smell of dry grass faded slightly, replaced by something sharper, like heated dust. The birds still faced forward, unblinking, unwavering. I took a slow step backward. The field did not resist, but it did not welcome either. It simply continued. I reached the edge of the clearing again, stopped, looked back once. The birds had not moved, not even slightly. But now I noticed something I had missed before. They were not all identical species. Different shapes, different sizes, different forms of stillness, yet all synchronized in direction, all locked toward the same unseen point, as if whatever was there did not matter what they were, only that they were looking at it together. I stepped into the forest again. The moment I crossed the edge, sound returned. Leaves rustled faintly. A distant branch shifted. Breath felt normal again. But the silence of the field remained behind me, heavy, complete, unresolved. I turned one last time. The birds were still there, perfectly arranged, facing the forest, facing something I could not see. And in that moment, it felt less like they were watching something ahead, and more like they were waiting for it to finish looking back. The office smelled of paper that had aged without permission, not simply old, but continuously used, as if time itself had been handling the files. Filing cabinets lined the walls in quiet rows, their metal surfaces dulled, scratched, and warm in places where no heat source should exist. The fluorescent light above flickered softly, never fully committing to stability. I stood at the records desk. A stack of personnel logs sat open in front of me, and there it was again, the name, repeated across decades. Same handwriting, same signature. Same entry style, a ranger who, according to official records, had vanished years ago, yet continued appearing in schedules long after disappearance. I turned page after page. The smell in the room shifted. Ink, paper, machine oil, and something underneath it all, like damp fabric left too long in closed spaces. The log showed routine entries at first. Patrol completion, equipment checks, weather reports, all signed, all consistent, all belonging to someone no one could remember meeting. I checked older records. Same name, Same duties, but the dates never stopped. Even after the official disappearance report, even after the file was sealed, the entries continued, as if absence had never been recognized as a valid condition. A soft creak came from the hallway behind me. I froze. The sound repeated, slow, measured, like boots stepping across wood that had learned the rhythm long ago. I turned slightly. Empty corridor. Only light and shadow. But the air felt occupied. The smell of paper grew stronger, now mixed with something faintly earthy. Fresh soil, like something had just come inside from outside and refused to leave the scent behind. I returned to the logs. The newest entry was dated yesterday. Impossible. The handwriting was identical, but the pressure of the pen looked recent. Still pressed to, deeply into the page. It read, Patrol complete. Route unchanged. Force responding normally. I stared at it for a long time, then turned the page. The next entry was already there. Same date, different time, no break in continuity. Visitor observed near northern boundary. Did not acknowledge presence. Proceeded as usual. My chest tightened slightly. I looked around the office. The room felt smaller than before. Not physically, but structurally, like space had been adjusted to remove excess uncertainty. Another creak came from the hallway, closer this time. I stood slowly. The logs on the desk shifted slightly. Not falling, not sliding, just repositioning, as if aligning themselves to a new order I had not agreed to. The smell of damp earth intensified, now unmistakable. Wet soil after rain. Fresh. Clothes. I stepped toward the doorway. Each movement felt echoed, not by sound, but by delay, as if the room was repeating me half a second behind my actions. I reached the hall, looked down it, empty, but the sense of presence was no longer subtle. It was structured, defined, like someone standing just outside visibility, but fully within awareness. Then I saw the footprints, on the wooden floor, fresh, mud still dark and wet, leading from the outside door into the office, and stopping, right behind the desk where I had been sitting. I looked back. The chair was slightly pulled out. Not much, just enough to suggest recent use. Too recent. The logs on the desk had changed again. A new page appeared on top. No movement, no sound, just placement. The ink was still fresh enough to reflect light slightly. It read, Clock out deferred. I stepped away from the desk. The hallway creaked again, now directly behind me. I turned quickly. Nothing there. Only empty corridors stretching into dim light. But the footprints continued. New ones now, appearing beside the older ones. Walking pattern unchanged. As if two sets of movement were sharing the same space without acknowledging each other. I moved toward the storage room. The air grew heavier as I approached. The smell of paper and ink intensified. The door was slightly open. I don't remember opening it. Inside, uniforms hung neatly, pressed, clean, undisturbed, except for one, still slightly damp, as if recently worn. On the table beside them lay a badge. Old, tarnished, but polished in a way that suggested ongoing maintenance. Not abandonment. The name engraved matched the logs. The missing ranger. The one who never clocked out. Behind me, the office lights flickered once. I turned. The corridor was no longer empty. A shape stood at the far end, not fully visible, not fully formed, but present enough that the air around it felt structured differently, like it was taking up a role the space had been missing. The footprints in the office shifted slightly, no longer leading inward, now circling, as if the entire room had become part of a route that never ended. The logs on the desk turned a page on their own. One final entry appeared. No date, no time, just text. Duty continues. And for a moment, the building felt less like a place I had entered and more like a place I had always been assigned to return to. The oak tree stood apart from the rest of the forest, older, wider, heavier in a way that didn't belong to biology alone. Its branches stretched outward like frozen memory. Leaves barely moved, even when the air should have allowed it. The ground beneath it was uneven, soft in places where it shouldn't have been. The smell here was different. Roots, Damp soil, deep earth that had not seen light in a long time, and something faintly familiar beneath it all, like childhood misplaced. I stepped closer. The trunk was massive up close, bark thick, layered, marked by time that felt excessive. Then I saw it, a gap, not natural decay, too clean, too intentional, a hollow at the base of the tree, darkness inside it that did not reflect light properly. I crouched. The air coming from within was colder than the forest around it, not just temperature, condition, like stepping into a place that had stopped participating in weather. I leaned closer. The smell deepened. Wet soil, old wood, and something like fabric that had been buried but never fully absorbed. Inside the hollow, space opened downward, a narrow descent carved into the root system itself. Not collapsing, not broken, formed. I hesitated only briefly, then lowered myself in. The walls were root and earth, closed, pressed, alive in a way that felt too aware. Each movement disturbed fine dust that had never been touched. The smell intensified with depth, soil turning older, air turning stiller, until even breath felt like an intrusion. At the bottom, the space widened. A chamber, not large, but deliberate, like something had been arranged rather than discovered. Objects lined the edges, personal belongings, backpacks, watches, jackets, small tools, all neatly placed, all preserved, no rot, no decay, as if time refused to apply itself here. I stood slowly. The air was warmer than expected underground, not comforting, suspended. The smell of damp earth surrounded everything, layered with faint traces of people who were no longer present. I stepped forward. A backpack caught my attention. Familiar, too familiar. I knelt and touched it. The fabric responded immediately. Not dust, not age, recognition. My fingers froze slightly. This was mine, from years ago, before I ever worked in this forest. I opened it carefully. Inside were small items I had not seen in decades. A broken compass, a worn notebook, a key I no longer remembered keeping. I closed it slowly. My breath felt tighter than before. The chamber did not feel like storage. It felt like return, like things were not lost here, only waiting. A soft shift came from deeper in the hollow. Not sound, movement in the soil itself. I turned toward it. The far end of the chamber was darker, denser, as if the earth there had been compacted repeatedly by something patient, something persistent. The smell changed again, now slightly metallic beneath the soil, like rain hitting old tools. I stepped closer. More belongings appeared as I moved forward. Not new, but revealed, as if the chamber only showed what I was prepared to remember. A jacket I once wore, a map I once carried, a photograph I had never thought to see again, all placed carefully, all untouched. And then one item stood out, a small object sitting alone on a flat stone surface, not arranged with the others, placed separately. I picked it up slowly. A pocket watch, cracked glass, stopped time. The hands frozen at a moment I could not immediately place, but my body recognized it before my mind did. A day, a moment, a decision I had once made and never revisited. Behind me, something shifted in the soil again, closer now, not emerging, not revealing itself, just adjusting position. I turned slightly. The chamber felt smaller than before, the walls closer, the air heavier, like the space was reorganizing around my attention. The smell of earth deepened until it felt almost breathable, not in air, in memory. I stepped back toward the entrance, but it no longer felt like an exit, just another section of the chamber. The belongings seemed to follow my movement visually, not moving themselves, but becoming more aligned with my path, as if I were not walking through the space, but being guided through a catalog of myself. A faint sound came from above, very far, with creaking, like the oak tree shifting slightly, not reacting, but acknowledging completion. I looked down at the pocket watch again. The cracked glass reflected something briefly, not my face, not the chamber, but a version of me standing still in the hollow, already not moving, already placed among the objects. I lowered it slowly. The chamber responded, not with sound, but with stillness deepening, as if it had reached the final step in remembering me. And deeper in the soil, something settled, not arriving, not leaving, just becoming part of what the hollow had always been prepared to hold. The morning logbook felt heavier every time I opened it, not physically, but as if the pages had started carrying resistance. The forest office smelled of fresh-cut wood, though nothing had been cut nearby. A clean, sharp scent drifting through old corners like a contradiction that refused to settle. I checked the official park records first. Something was missing. My name, not crossed out, not erased, just absent, as if it had never been entered at all. I flipped through older sheets. Same result. Even recent reports no longer listed me. The forest maps were worse. Entire sections of my patrol routes no longer showed my designation. Only blank lines where my path should have been. Outside, maintenance sheds stood half open. The smell of fresh wood drifted from them, though no repairs had been logged. Inside, tools were neatly arranged. Too neatly, like someone had reorganized absence itself. I stepped back onto the trail. Something felt off immediately. The familiar route no longer responded the same way. Markers were present but unreadable. Signposts stood in place but pointed nowhere consistent. The forest didn't feel unfamiliar. It felt uninterested, like it had stopped confirming my existence. A ranger passing nearby stopped briefly, looked directly at me, then continued walking without recognition. No greeting, no reaction, as if I had not registered in his perception at all. I called out once. No response, only the windless trees answering with silence. Then I noticed my badge. The engraved name had begun fading. Not scratched, not damaged, just thinning, like ink dissolving into memory. I touched it instinctively. The metal felt warmer than it should. Behind me, footsteps paused briefly, then continued. Not mine, not theirs. Something else. The trail ahead shifted slightly, subtle at first, then undeniable. Paths I knew well now led somewhere adjacent to themselves, as if the forest had rerouted familiarity away from me. I checked my radio. Static only, but beneath it, a faint gap where my calls should have returned, as if the system no longer had a channel for me. I stood still. The forest didn't. It continued without acknowledging pause. And that was the worst part. Not emptiness. Replacement. The lake was still when I arrived. Too still. Its surface held the sky without distortion, like glass that had forgotten it was liquid. Mist drifted just above the waterline. Cold, slow, soft against the air. Across the lake stood a cabin. It had not been there yesterday. No record, no trail leading to it. Just a structure sitting perfectly on the far shore, as if distance itself had placed it there carefully. A single lantern glowed in the window, warm, constant, unmoving. I walked the perimeter of the shore. No path forward, no boat, no bridge, only water separating me from something that felt familiar in a way I couldn't justify. The air smelled of moss and lake water, clean at first inhale, then slightly wrong underneath, like something submerged had started remembering how to surface. I waited. The cabin light did not flicker. It remained steady, watching without intention. Night approached slowly, or maybe I was the one slowing. Time near the lake felt uneven, hours compressing without warning. I checked the opposite shore again. The cabin remained, closer than before, or I was closer to it. The distance between us refused to stay fixed. I circled the lake edge again. When I returned to the same point, the cabin light felt brighter, not stronger, closer in definition, as if the lantern had adjusted its focus toward me. I called out once. No answer, only the water shifting faintly below the surface. But there was no wind, no disturbance, just reaction without cause. The smell of moss deepened, now layered with something like old wood soaked in memory. I tried to follow the shoreline further, but the lake bent slightly as I walked. Not physically, perceptually, keeping the cabin always in front of me, always centered, always waiting. I stopped again. The lantern flickered once, then steadied as if acknowledging awareness. Something in my chest tightened. Not fear. Recognition of pattern returning. I stepped back. The cabin did not retreat. It remained fixed in attention. A structure without approach. A presence without distance. Night fully settled. The lake reflected nothing but darkness now. And still the cabin remained visible. The lantern burning steadily through it all. Not guiding. Not signaling. Just continuing. I turned away briefly. When I looked back, the cabin was slightly farther. Or I had moved incorrectly. The lake gave no confirmation. Only silence. Only water that refused to explain its shape. And the lantern remained. Waiting. Neither closer nor farther. Just persistent. The radio had always been unreliable. That was normal. What wasn't normal was precision. The first broadcast came before sunrise. Weather report. Calm voice. Standard tone. Except to describe conditions that had not happened yet. Fog forming at 9:13. Wind shift at 11:40. Visibility drop in the northern sector after noon. I wrote it down anyway. By midday, every prediction was correct. Exactly. Down to minute alignment. The radio hissed softly between updates. Warm circuitry smell filled the station, like metal being gently heated without source. The second broadcast was different. Not weather. Movement. Subject approaching western perimeter. I froze. Nothing outside confirmed it. Yet the radio continued. Describing shifts in patrol routes. Describing conversations that had not occurred yet. Then it stopped briefly. Static only. Followed by my own voice. Not recorded. Not repeated. Live. You are listening. I stepped back. The radio continued speaking. Describing actions I had not taken yet. Including standing still. Including listening. Including reacting. The timeline felt less like a sequence. More like a script being previewed. I tried turning it off. The dial resisted slightly. Not mechanically. As if the device disagreed with the action. The broadcast shifted again. Conversation at 14:22. Then a pause. Then words I had not spoken yet. Returning from future silence. I stopped moving. The radio stopped briefly. Then resumed. Now softer. Closer. More personal. It began describing my thoughts. Not aloud, but accurately enough to feel invasive. I stepped away from the desk. The smell of hot circuitry grew stronger, like the device was no longer processing signal. It was generating it internally. Then the final broadcast came. Longer pause, heavier static, and then disappearance confirmed. I looked at the window. Outside, the forest remained still, but the feeling of continuity had changed, as if something ahead had already removed me from its sequence. The radio spoke one last time. Very softly. You will hear this before you speak it. Then silence. Complete. The bench sat alone beside the trail marker. Mile 21. Would worn smooth by time or repetition. The air around it smelled of pine needles and cool evening air. Fresh. Calm. Almost inviting. Too inviting. I stopped when I saw it. Something about it felt placed rather than discovered, as if the forest had positioned it deliberately in expectation of use. I walked closer, though it creaked softly beneath my hand. Not old, not new, just maintained. I sat down. That was a mistake. The world didn't shift. It softened, not visually, experientially, like pressure inside memory loosened. The smell of pine deepened, then changed, subtly to something older, something familiar. Images formed without permission. A life I did not recognize as mine. A home I had never lived in. A family I could not recall. All unfolding with emotional certainty I couldn't reject. I stood up quickly. The images stopped. The bench creaked once behind me, as if disappointed. I turned. No one there, but the feeling of presence remained beside the seat. Still warm. Still occupied. I stepped away. The trail behind me felt different now, as if I had walked it before in another version of myself. The bench remained at mile 21, waiting, not empty, not full, just experienced. The storm arrived without warning. Snow fell heavily around the outpost, swallowing distance. muting the world into white silence. Wind pressed against the walls, but never fully entered. Inside, the air smelled of frozen timber. Sharp, dry, still. I waited. Hours passed without structure. Then I saw it, a lantern outside, standing upright in the snow, unmoving, no tracks leading to it, no wind disturbing it, just light suspended in cold air. I stepped closer to the window. The lantern glow did not flicker. It simply existed. The storm thickened. Visibility collapsed around it. Yet the lantern remained perfectly defined. Each night, it appeared again. Same position, same distance. Never closer, never farther. Just persistent. I tried following it once. Stepping into the snow. The air outside felt heavier than expected. Cold that didn't burn. Cold that erased sensation instead. Tracks formed beneath my boots. But they stopped halfway toward the lantern, as if deciding not to continue. When I looked up, the lantern had not moved, but the space around it felt altered, like it was occupying a place the storm refused to acknowledge fully. I returned inside. The lantern remained visible through the blizzard. Every night, every hour, always waiting, never approaching. Then one morning, the storm ended. Sudden, complete, no gradual easing. Just absence. The lantern was still there, now in clear air, closer than before. Or perhaps it had always been that close. The snow around it showed no path, no origin, no arrival, only continuation. I stood at the window. The lantern did not flicker. It did not dim. It simply remained, as if it had survived the storm by never being part of it in the first place. And when I finally stepped outside again, it felt less like approaching a lantern, and more like it had already been standing where I was about to arrive. The station felt quieter than usual that evening. Not peaceful, just reduced, as if the forest had turned down its own volume. Pine shadows stretched long across the clearing. The air smelled of crushed needles and cold sap, sharp and clean in a way that almost felt reassuring. Almost. That was when I first saw it. A figure near the tree line. Tall, still, not hiding, not approaching, just existing at the edge where light stopped behaving normally. I watched it for a long time. It did not move, no shift in posture, no turn of head, no reaction to my presence, only presence itself. Days passed like that. Every evening, it returned to the same place, or perhaps it never left. I couldn't tell anymore. The air around it always carried the same scent. Crushed pine cones, faintly bitter, like something stepped on too gently to fully break. I should have felt alarm, but I didn't. Something about its stillness began to feel familiar, not safe, just known. I found myself watching it longer each night, less tense, less certain of why I had ever been afraid. It never came closer, never retreated, only observed. Then one evening, it did something different. It left a mark, not on a tree, not on the ground, but in the space between us. A shape I couldn't immediately name, carved into the air with absence rather than motion. I stood still. The figure remained still, and for the first time, it felt like we were sharing the same silence instead of confronting it. The fence line had always marked a boundary. Old wood, rusted wire, a line drawn through trees like a forgotten instruction. On this side, the managed forest. On the other, something less defined. The air near it smelled different. Faint blossoms, sweet vegetation, warmth beneath the soil. I stepped closer. The fence creaked softly, though nothing touched it. Crossing it felt familiar, not like entering somewhere new, like returning somewhere that had been paused. The moment I passed through, the forest changed subtly. Trees older than expected, roots deeper than logic allowed, light falling in patterns that didn't match the sky. I walked further. The smell of flowering shrubs grew stronger, soft, almost comforting. Landmarks appeared that I had no record of, yet I recognized them anyway. Not from memory, from something deeper, like recognition before thought. A clearing open ahead, and in it, a stillness that felt intentional, not empty, prepared. I stopped. Something here had been waiting longer than I could measure. and it felt certain that I had finally arrived at the correct version of myself. The building appeared where no map agreed it should exist. A ranger station. Clean, structured, real in a way that felt too complete. The air smelled of warm tea and clean linen, comforting, controlled, gentle in a way the forest had never been. I stepped inside. Immediately, someone greeted me. Not surprised, not cautious, familiar, as if I had simply been late returning. The interior was organized, perfect logs, updated schedules, active communications. My name appeared on the board. Correct, consistent, current. I stared at it longer than I should have. A colleague passed by, nodded. Late shift again, he said softly, as if it were routine. I tried to respond, but the words felt unnecessary, like conversation was optional here. Photographs lined the walls. I stopped in front of one. It showed me, standing with the team, smiling slightly. No memory of the moment existed in me, but the image insisted otherwise. Another photo showed me signing logs. Another showed me standing at the fence line, the same fence I had crossed recently. The station hummed with quiet life, everything functioning, everything accounted for, yet something felt gently misplaced, like I had been inserted into continuity rather than lived into it. That night, I slept in quarters that already had my belongings, folded, arranged, waiting, and when I woke, nothing in the room had changed, as if I had never stopped belonging there. The clearing appeared without transition, just space, then trees, then a door, standing between two trunks as if it had always been part of the forest architecture. Wooden, simple, weathered in a way that suggested age without decay. The air smelled of sun-warmed bark, soft light filtering through leaves that barely moved. I approached slowly. The door did not react. No creak, no shift, no invitation, just presence. I circled it once. There was no frame beyond it, no structure attached, only the idea of a threshold existing independently of a building. I reached out. My hand stopped just before touching it. A sensation passed through me, recognition without memory, like every previous path had been leading here without informing me. I placed my hand on the door, warm, not from temperature, from familiarity. It opened slightly on its own, not fully, just enough to reveal darkness beyond. And then, a hallway, not forest, not cabin, a corridor I somehow recognized without ever having seen. The air inside smelled different. Indoors, dustless, waiting. I stepped closer. The door widened slightly more, as if responding to certainty. Behind me, the forest was silent. Ahead, the hallway extended beyond sight, not threatening, not welcoming, just final in a way that felt prepared long before my arrival. I stood at the threshold for a long moment, then stepped through. The forest behind me was gone immediately, not fading, not disappearing, simply no longer relevant. The space I stood in was still, completely still. No wind, no scent, no pressure time, only absence shaped into environment. Then I saw it, not hidden, not emerging, already present. The entity stood in the center of the clearing, tall, quiet, not monstrous in form, not distorted, just observing, like something that had spent too long learning, without interruption. It did not move when I arrived. It did not need to. The air around it felt emptied of expectation. I understood, without explanation, that it had always been here, not in this place, but in this function, watching, measuring, waiting for outcomes rather than causing them. The smell of the forest was gone. Even memory of scent felt distant. It finally spoke, not with voice alone, but with understanding forming directly in thought. Not warning, not threat, recognition. It had watched generations pass through these woods, each one believing they were separate, each one becoming part of the same unfolding pattern. I stood still. It did not approach. It did not need to. Then I understood something that did not arrive like revelation. It settled. I was not brought here. I had been moving through it the entire time, every place, every chapter, every return, not destinations, positions within a system already in motion. The entity did not judge. It simply completed awareness. And for the first time, there was no forest left to interpret me, only stillness that had always been waiting to include me properly. When dawn finally came, it did not feel like morning, only completion. And in that completion, only one set of footprints remained, not leading away, not leading forward, just continuing where movement had already stopped making difference.